Hello Keto Bonitos and fasting friends. In this video we're talking about cholesterol. Whoa. Scary subject, lots of people have been asking me about it. What we're going to be talking about today in this video is cholesterol, what it is basically. We're not going to go too sciencey with that, but we are going to be talking about something called the Feldman Protocol, which is how to tell whether your cholesterol is dangerous or not. Welcome to the Liz and Scats channel. Hello, my name is Liz. I'm a clinical holistic therapist, yoga and meditation teacher, and with my lovely husband Scats, we have been doing a keto and intermittent fasting lifestyle since the end of May this year. Together, we have lost around about 110 pounds between us. Scats obviously the majority because he has reversed his type 2 diabetes symptoms, which is unbelievable. Thank you to keto and intermittent fasting. Now we're very close to our goal weights, both of us, and this means that we can concentrate more on doing even more research to help you, and so you can help us by doing this.
Subscribe, and click on the bell.
So let's dive right in. Cholesterol. You've all heard about this. All know that we need to reduce the cholesterol. It forms narrowings in our arteries that can break off and lead to stroke and heart disease. This is obviously not a good thing. What's not so widely known is the different types of cholesterol. Let's start with HDL. Now this is high density lipoprotein and it's actually classed as good cholesterol. Now let's move on to LDL. This isn't exactly the whole truth when it comes to LDL because there are quite a few varieties. The biggest of which, obviously not that big, is VLDL, which is very low density lipoproteins. Now these are the largest of the low density lipoproteins and they actually are a carrier for your cholesterol, like a little boat. As the VLDL transports itself all the way around your body in your bloodstream, it actually deposits particles of itself into various different bits of your body, like certain cells, things like that. It actually helps transmit hormones around the body. Eventually, the VLDL becomes what we call IDL, which is intermediate lipoprotein. IDL does the same thing as the VLDL, and it just transports itself around the body, depositing bits of itself as it's needed around the body into the cells, eventually becoming LDL, which is low density lipoprotein. This is always known in common circles as bad cholesterol. Now that's not entirely true. So far we've had VLDL, IDL and LDL. They're essentially the same particle. But as they circulate around the body, they're donating particles and becoming smaller and more dense. So what is bad LDL? So not all LDL is good. It turns bad when it's exposed to glucose or glycation. And therefore it becomes vulnerable to oxidation and fractionated. On the LDL particle, there is a small protein, very special, called ApoB100, and this acts like a security guard and allows access to certain tissues. There is only one per LDL particle. Sugar or glucose damages the ApoB100 protein, and then it can't be accepted into tissues. Damaged LDL is not acceptable, and then they can't be taken out of the circulation, and so they line the inside of the arteries. The lining of these blood vessels only accepts damaged and oxidized LDL particles, as it increases the permeability of the cell walls in the blood vessels, which are extremely thin, and an oxidized LDL particle is slightly smaller than a healthy LDL particle. Once they're underneath the skin of the blood vessels, as it were, they come into contact with something called macrophages that only recognize damaged or oxidized LDL particles. then it binds with them, a little bit like Pac-Man, and this forms what's called a foam cell, and that's what causes the narrowing of the arteries. So when you're looking at your cholesterol levels, it's really important to gauge whether your glucose levels are high at the same time. Obviously, if they are, you've got a bigger chance of you oxidizing those LDL particles. So now, let's just take a look at how in the UK and Ireland and also Australia we take our cholesterol readings. How do we get our cholesterol tested? We have to go to a medical practitioner of some description and get a blood test taken. So we get blood drawn from our arms, normally in the crook of our arm here, and a little vial of that is shipped off to the blood laboratory and it is then tested. So in Ireland, the UK and Australia, I'm only talking about these 3 countries because that's all I've been researching so far. The blood is taken away, but it's not put in a centrifuge or spun. So here's what happens. The VLDL, or the largest of the cholesterol molecules, is only estimated. The IDL isn't actually registered at all, so it's kind of assumed that it's not there. Then the LDL is calculated as a result of this process. Doesn't quite sound right, does it? Now you can actually pay for your blood to actually be spun in a centrifuge because this gives a far more accurate idea of the LDL particles and oxidized LDL particles within your bloodstream. The blood will actually be spun in a gel and then will actually be inserted into a machine which registers on a graph. When we have oxidized LDL particles in our bloodstream, you see the healthy LDL peak, but also another peak later on, which is the oxidized LDL. So if there's only one peak when you've had your blood spun in a centrifuge, then that means there is no glycation of your LDL. It's worth pointing out at this point that oxidation of LDL particles of cholesterol are actually accelerated with omega-6 oils. Take a look up in the corner and then you'll see which nuts and oils contain a lot of omega-6. We do eat a lot of them in the Western world. So what do we do next? Now we know that cholesterol tests in the UK and Ireland and Australia are a little bit could be one way or the other, really. We still don't know whether the LDL is oxidized or not. That's the dangerous one. And so high levels of LDL could mean absolutely anything. High levels of oxidized LDL is what's now called pattern B. And this is what we're trying to avoid at all costs. Now, obviously, not everybody can afford to pay out the money necessary to have the centrifugal blood tests done to calculate your LDL. So what do we do now? There is a protocol, fairly new, only in the last few years has it actually been accepted into the scientific community. The Feldman protocol measures your triglycerides and also HDL to predict the amount of oxidized LDL within your bloodstream. HDL actually reduces the amount of oxidized LDL within the body, which is why some fats are much more healthy for us than others. So here we go. Here's some mathematics. I'm going to be checking my notes more often than usual. What we have to do with your results, you'll get HDL, LDL and triglyceride when you get a cholesterol test in either Ireland, UK or Australia. Look at the triglyceride number and then look at the HDL number. And what we have to do is divide the triglyceride level by the HDL level. If your triglyceride ratio is below 0.8, then your oxidized LDL will be low. If your results are over 1.8, then this is where we need to start considering a change in our diets. So just this tiny little equation actually produces a more accurate assessment of oxidized LDL in your bloodstream than a usual blood test done by your GP. So now it's bonus time. What can we do? How does keto and fasting help? When we're fasting, that actually increases HDL, or the good cholesterol, in the blood, but it actually reduces the amount of LDL receptors in the liver. So there's more floating about, giving a possible false reading. So if you have high LDL readings and you're doing intermittent fasting, then don't worry, because after a while, the keto diet actually increases the amount of LDL particles available and will slurp up all the untainted LDL in the blood. Also, reducing insulin helps to make more receptors over time. It's a win-win situation. With a ketogenic diet, because of the low amount of carbohydrates that we're ingesting every day, it means that there's less glucose floating around in the body to create oxidized LDL, which is amazing. So how do we increase HDL, I hear you ask? HDL is increased by omega-3 fatty acids. How amazing is that? We often in the Western world eat way too many omega-6s, which has kind of the opposite effect of omega-3s. Now, if you watch the omega-3 video, you'll be able to see which foods are amazing to increase our levels. Things like oily fish, so salmon, mackerel, sardines, all of those gorgeous little fishes are very, very good for upping our HDL levels, which will then hopefully reduce the amount of LDL cholesterol in our bodies. There are also nuts and seeds, which are fantastic for increasing our omega-3 levels. For example, walnuts and macadamia nuts, pumpkin seeds, particularly good. Chia seeds have an enormous amount of omega-3. So in summary, if you're at all worried about anything to do with this subject, go and talk to a medical practitioner, a nutritionalist, someone in the know. Having a high LDL count doesn't necessarily mean that you're in any particular danger, but do watch what you're eating, including lots of carbohydrates. If you reduce the amount of carbohydrates, we reduce the amount of oxidized LDL, which is the scary stuff. So there we are. Our little cholesterol video is over. Not too much science, I hope, this time. Please like and subscribe and click on the bell, ting, and leave some comments below. We love to hear from you, always. Make sure that you tune in on Wednesdays for our live stream, always at 8 p.m. GMT. Also in the description are our affiliate links, all of the gear that we use to make our videos, walking gear, boots, coats, things like that. Click on the link, and if you buy, we get a little bit of a commission and you get a wonderful product. And also be aware that you may even get a discount, but you will not pay any more money. There's also merchandise links, lots of t-shirts, hoodies, all sorts of things going on in our merch shop at the moment. Great Christmas gifts. Go and have a look. And finally, thank you to all of our patrons for actually becoming patrons. How wonderful are you? Our link to the Patreon website and all of its fabulous bonuses and all of the wonderful things that we'll do for you once you become a patron is in the link below. So thank you very much for watching until the end, and please come and see us again. Bye bye.